Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with mortgage banker, founder, and author Brighton Gbarazia. He has been working in finance and real estate for over a decade and has worked with some of Canada's largest banks. He was born in Nigeria and immigrated to Canada with his family when he was a child. They now reside in British Columbia, Canada. When he's not talking about money, he enjoys traveling the world and running half marathons. We cover quite a bit here. Enjoy.
Hey, it's great to meet you. Where are you located?
I'm in Canada, British Columbia.
Okay,
Vancouver
wonderful.
area.
Yeah, that's right across the up there in Seattle, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I spent some time up there in the mid to late 90s. It was a good time. I loved it. It's beautiful.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, it is beautiful.
Yeah.
Expensive, but beautiful.
Yeah, right. Of course, that's the other part. Well, I'm located in Kansas City, Missouri. It's great to meet you, and I'd love to begin our conversation before we get into your life and work and mission by asking you, we're coming up on the 4-year anniversary of COVID, and I'm wondering if we go back to 2020, how did you survive that time period? How did it change you?
Whoa, that's a good question. Man, COVID, hey? I think,
yeah.
It's funny, my kid came out just shortly. It's funny, our kid happened in February, and, I remember early on when they were talking about the whole thing happening, in China, and it seemed like in North America it was sort of like, oh, that's never going to happen here because we got a really good, healthcare system. So I think in Canada, anyways, there was this idea, oh, that's like a China problem kind of thing. So no one really took it seriously. I mean, before the whole shutdown, we literally had our kid. People were literally able to come to the hospital, and then, I think 2 weeks later, there was the whole implementation of shutdown. So it was, a good thing that we had a kid because I think it kept us preoccupied. But at the same time, it was kind of sad because, we didn't get to have the normal experience in terms of, having our kid be able to go see, their families and stuff. It was just, us and our kid. But I think having a kid helped us survive that 2-year kind of isolation because we were so busy as new parents just trying to keep this thing alive, right? So I think that's what helped me survive the COVID thing. It's just I had a kid, so I was really busy at that time with the kid.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah, that would be bittersweet because, once COVID happened, everything shut down. I remember in that winter of 2019, I saw pictures of Beijing and no one was on the streets, and it sent a chill up my spine. I was like, what is going on? And then it was like, there's this COVID thing. It's not a game. It's serious. And I was like, oh, no. But, in your mind, you're thinking once it gets towards, Canada and America, that there's going to be a level of this where they're going to close borders or something's going to be magnanimous. Because under Obama, several times that happened with SARS, and I believe COVID-18 or 17 was the same kind of thing. And they had enough people out there that stopped it. So, but in your line of work and as a mortgage broker, you probably saw an uptick in your business.
Yeah, I mean, it was no one really. The weird thing was no one really knew. I think COVID, like you're saying, it kind of caught us off guard, but it shouldn't have caught us off guard. I think it was just the idea, like I said, in Canada, there was definitely this perception that's a China problem. It wasn't going to come to us, right? So I don't think anyone really took it seriously. But in terms of business, it was weird because at that time, I was still working for an employer because I transitioned to become self-employed now 2 years ago, right? So at that time, I was still working for a company. It's funny, at that time when I had my kid, I was trying to get them to give me the ability to work from home, and it was a struggle because they were like, no, we need you back in the office. And then when COVID happened, it was like everyone could work from home. And all of a sudden, everything was okay to work from home. So when I was saying, and I was still in the business of mortgage, I was working for someone else. So it was slow. People didn't really know. But then the weird thing that happened in the real estate aspect was that people started buying because they reduced rates so much, and people were looking for bigger space, and they want to be outdoors. So it was like there was this lockdown happening, but from the real estate market, people were buying like crazy. People were just buying and spending so much because I guess they were trying to pre-plan for another doomsday So the real estate market was actually really active during COVID. And then on top of that, pricing got really expensive during COVID because, again, it was rock zero pricing for real estate. So it was this weird thing where there was like this health thing happening in the greater world where we're all scared, but yet people were still buying real estate like crazy because it was, I guess, relatively cheap, and people were also thinking, making these life decisions regarding, like, do they want to live outdoors, do they want to be in the city, all these changes that people were going through as a result of COVID, or reflecting back on what kind of life they wanted. So it was a weird thing where in the real estate market, it was actually, COVID was very good. Though we all thought it was going to be really bad, it actually was really good. And then when I made the transition, the same thing's just happening. It's funny now, it's quieter now because interest rates have spiked up. So now people are more reserved. But during COVID, no, people were really buying because they wanted to get bigger places. They wanted to move more to the, outside the cities and stuff like that. So it was very strange in terms of real estate, in terms of what was happening at that time.
So you're also an author and the founder of Wealth Marathon, and I'm curious, if I put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day, and one of the kids was curious and said, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
I would say I try to help people learn how money works. I think that's the short is what I try to do. So I'm a mortgage broker, but I would say I'm really more of a money person. Like, I try to just help people how money works, because growing up as a kid who immigrated from Nigeria and came to Canada, my family, I saw the impact money can have when you don't understand how it works. A lot of people are really hardworking people. They want to do the right thing. But I was of the belief that human beings, we can argue about what happens when we come here, how we got here, and we can also argue about what happens when we leave this earth. But one thing we can argue is that we created a system. And when human beings create a system, there's those who they favor and those that they don't favor. And what I try to do with money is try to teach people to understand it's a system, it's a human-created system, and you just have to understand what the incentives are and understand where you stand in that system. Sometimes the system, unfortunately, doesn't benefit you, and you need to understand how to change that. And sometimes it doesn't benefit you because you don't understand how the system works. So the behaviors and the things you're doing are not in tune to how the system wants to, reward people. So if I'm in front of a third grade, that's what I would say, is that I try to teach people how money works. And their question would be like, why is that important? I would say, honestly, money really isn't that important. But what's important is that the way we create our system in the world is that money is how you kind of move things and able to go on trips or spend time with your family. So it's about understanding how it works. Therefore, you actually don't have to pay attention to it that much, because what ultimately matters is, the relationships you have with people, with your family, with your friends, your community. Those are what really matters. But if you don't understand how money works, those things can get impacted. You may not be able to have a good relationship with your family because you're struggling with money and you don't understand how that works. You may not be able to invest more in your community because you don't understand how money works, right? So that's how I would answer for third grade, is I just try to teach people how money works, really.
No, that's a great answer. Absolutely. And it's essential, I think, for the young mind to understand that. So how did you get to this point in your life? What was it about your upbringing and your journey that gave you these seeds to not only help people understand money, but to be a writer and all these things that you are?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, where it came to was just my experience. I'm a kid. My family, like I said, we're refugees from Nigeria, and we immigrated to Canada. And I just saw my parents, at the time when we immigrated, this was in the 90s, so Nigeria was what we call like a cash-based system, which just essentially means like people just buy stuff cash usually. There's not a thing like credit cards and stuff like that. So my parents immigrated from that world to a world where it was more advanced in the sense of like people will use credit here, and they weren't familiar with that. So growing up, my parents just weren't in tune with how that system works. So they made a lot of mistakes because they got bad advice, and some of it was maybe on their part, but a lot of it was really no one really taught them how this system works. So therefore, they were an easier target to take advantage of because they just didn't understand how it works, right? So that experience growing up and watching that and seeing the impact of what that means when you don't have or have an understanding of how money works kind of pushed me into wanting to get into finance. So I want to go into banking with the, what you maybe call naive now, with the idea that, hey, if this happens to my family, maybe if I get into this space and learn more about it, I could help other families like my family or other people to learn how this actually works. But then when I entered the financial space after university, I then discovered that while I was a financial advisor, it felt like I was more or less like a salesperson. That's not really what I imagined when I was like going through school. I thought, oh, this were people who would sit down with people and really help them out and figure and make sure they get the right information. But then when I became a financial advisor, I realized all I'm doing is trying to sell products. And that didn't really sit well with me because I understood that I was very good in the sense of like I could talk to people. And once you build trust in people, it's this weird thing where you can get them to do certain things without them not realizing. And I didn't like that. So when I would have someone in front of me, I always thought about my parents. So a lot of the advice I would give sometimes were nothing about selling product. I would just say, look, you need to do this, or I think, you need to be more honest about this. And while that was good financial advice from an advisor in terms of like my position with the company, it wouldn't necessarily lead me to be what they call like, a quality employee, if you want to call it that way, at the bank's perspective, because I wasn't selling, and we would have meetings where every time you had to sell something. And I didn't really understand why I had to sell someone a credit card. They already had 3 credit cards with us. But again, that was one of my targets, right? Same thing with mortgages and all that. So I eventually was laying this plan early on that I wanted to do it my way. But at the time when I was younger, I was scared in a sense. Like I didn't really know how to do this. It seemed so overwhelming because at that time we didn't have the internet and all this stuff. And so to start up my own firm just seemed like a really daunting experience. And I also didn't want to really go into selling more stuff to people in the sense of like managing their money. What I really, really wanted to do was just educate people on how the system works and then teach them to empower themselves, because I think that's what this comes to, just empowering yourself to learn a little bit about how the money works so you don't really have to keep paying attention to it, but you understand the basics of it, right? So fast forward now to 3 years ago, I started writing the book. I spent a decade now in the financial industry. I'm kind of writing stuff and the mortgage stuff upset me because when I worked at the bank, I had people who were homeowners, and they were really generous. They would tell me honestly what it was like to be a homeowner. And they would tell me stories about they were struggling to pay for their kids, and they would have to use credit cards. So I was an immigrant kid, and I had the whole immigrant image in my head, the Canadian dream, if you want to call it, right? Where I wanted to own the house because I wanted to show my parents, look how successful you are, look at all the struggles you did. It was totally worth it, right? Your kid now has a home and all these different things. And when I started talking to these people who own homes, I started to kind of feel depressed about it because they sort of opened my eyes up to hey, yeah, owning a home is great, but there's all these different things. You want to think about your family, how you're going to save for retirement. And as a young person at the time, I hadn't really thought that far ahead. I just wanted to get the home. So when doing that and then going through the mortgage experience, I saw how people just were also being pushed into that same idea because no one was taking the time to just honestly tell them how it worked and then let them make the decisions they want. So I started writing all the stuff I was learning at the bank, literally on my BlackBerry on my phone. And, a couple of months later, I wrote a lot, and I wondered and I said, I guess I should put this in the book. And again, I was nervous because whenever you're putting stuff publicly, it's just, you have people that can critique it. But I realized that was a thing going back to when I want to start that firm early on. It was always this fear thing I had of people being judging me. So I just thought, let me do it. So after some major canceling, I finally published the book. And like all things in life, it's just more the fears that are greater in your head because, we all have vivid imaginations. And it wasn't anything that I thought it would be. The book went well. People were happy about reading it. And lots of friends and family were happy that I put it out. So, and then I transitioned to then go, okay, let me create that firm because nowadays it's a lot easier to do what I wanted to do back in the day. I don't have to have, this huge capital. And that's where Wealth Marathon came about. It's just a place where I can just have conversations about money and give my input in terms of what I think about it. and then people can kind of do whatever they want with it. So my whole approach is just teaching people things that I've learned, and then they can do whatever they want with it, because I really believe it's about empowering yourself and educating yourself rather than you looking for someone to just do everything for you. So I call myself a coach because I think that's more what I want to be, because when I play basketball, that's how it works, right? Athletes have coaches, but at the end of the day, the coach isn't the one who's playing the game, right? The coach isn't the one who gets the ultimate reward, right? It's the player, and it's up to you to listen to the coach. But more importantly, you have to then do what the coach is saying on your own time to actually have success. So I like that method better than saying that I'm going to get a financial advisor, which people are indirectly are saying that I'm going to get someone that's going to help me make money. And I want to change that mindset. No, you should get someone that can teach you how this works so you can learn how to make money for yourself, because that's the long-term wealth creation, right? So long-winded answer, but that's in general how this all kind of came about.
That's a great answer. That covers a lot of bases. So I'm curious, who's been kind of a hero or a motivator for you in your life?
I would say my parents first, just like seeing them work. I have an adopted grandfather, as I said in my book. He was the one that really kind of changed the course of where I was going. He was very honest and transparent, and then invested in me. Other than that, there's general people, just like you want to talk about, like celebrities or whatever. I listen to Warren Buffett. I've listened to Tony Robbins. Other inspiration like Jay-Z, like when I was growing up, was a huge, huge inspiration for me, just because I could relate in the sense of the things he was going through, and then seeing him also having success. So whenever I would get down, I was turning on Jay-Z music, or I listened to his music, because to me, it's just like anything in life. It's nice to know someone else is going through the same struggles you're going through, and they can understand without you having to explain it. And to me, he was that model, like, oh, okay, he's going through the same thing, same journey, but yet he's found some success, so it must be possible too for me. So, but the big one would be my parents. Like, my parents are a huge inspiration for what I do, work ethic and stuff like that they taught me. So those are my big heroes and my big inspiration, really.
So if you can meet one person alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating, who would that be?
That is a tough. It's a tough one to answer, because I'm not really someone who follows. There's a lot of interest in people. So off the top of my head, I don't know. Like, if I'm answering honestly, I don't know. But there's a lot of interest in people that I think that are around this earth that have interest in take and opinions on things. So I don't have one specific that comes up to the top of my head. But my dad's passed away, so I would say, if I were to pick a different answer, I would say, yeah, I would love to talk to my dad today now. I'm my father, and I think it's always cool for me. I would love to just kind of like pick his brain, because now I have a different perspective that maybe I didn't, because now I'm a father. So that would be a cool conversation to be able to have with him.
For sure. So let me ask you this. Of all of the clients and the things that you've done, what's been one of the proudest things that you've done? One of the things that you've accomplished that you're the proudest of?
Oh, there's. I think for me, I'm very simplistic in the sense of, like, I'm not really someone who thrives on, I guess what you call excellence promotion. I'm more about relationships, and I think to me, one of the proudest thing is just like when I wrote my book, and my close friends, like friends that, you talk to, or colleagues that you've worked in the past, and them just saying, oh my goodness, why didn't someone tell me this when I was like starting this process? I wish I had your book before I bought a home. Like, people need to be told all this stuff before they buy a home. So I think it's stuff like that that really, to me, makes me happy when people find genuine value and they see, like, okay, someone's just trying to create some resources. So I think that was really proud, because it's one thing for your friends and family to, obviously you expect your friends and family to say things, nice things about you, but when I have colleagues that I've worked with, but I haven't seen them in like years, and then they pick up the book and they feel the need to send me like a long letter, text or email, generally saying like, wow, like this is an amazing read and this is great. You need to get this out to, and I'm going to, give it out to different people and stuff like that. That means a lot. And the personal story was my adopted grandfather, just so you know. So my adopted grandfather is white. I'm black. So they both passed away. Grandfather and grandmother, they passed away, but I was really close with them. And their kids, I wasn't really close with their kids, but I was writing a section about them in the book, so I wanted to make sure I get the blessing from the family. So I reached out to one of their daughters, and it was amazing. She read the book, she gave her consent, and on top of that, she gave me a review on Amazon. So I think those are those moments that are just like, wow, like, someone that and again, I don't know her because I always just talk to the grandparents. So I don't have a relationship with her, but for her to just know the connection, she's like, my parents always talked about you. For her to do that was just like, and we don't have a relation, was just to me like one of the happiest moments during that time for me recently. I was just like, wow, like that shows that people are just genuinely nice if you can, meet them and talk to them. And, in the world that we live in now today, it can feel like it's not the case, but, people genuinely are nice. So that was a really proud moment for me, just having her give that blessing and her going above and beyond to then further support me.
So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the 20-year-old version of you, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom you've gained in your life so far. What advice would you give that young version of you?
Do what you want to do and stay with it for the long term. I think that's the biggest thing. Like everything I want to do now, I always go, man, I wish I started this earlier. So I think if I'm going back, I would tell my younger self, whatever you're trying to do, just get started and then just be invested in it for the long term. You'll figure and adjust as things come along. So that would be the advice I'll give my younger self. Just start what you're thinking, and then you figure it out as it goes along, but make sure you're committed for the long haul.
So everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
That's a good question. I think my perception is someone that I'm just really, I'm simple in the sense of like, I just like to be around good people. I'm really proud on family. I'm big on family. So I think when people think of me as like, the perception out there might be I know everything. I actually don't. I'm more of a curious person. I like to learn. So I'm not really someone who likes to believe I know everything. I know what I know, but I'm also more curious about things, right? So I think people might get the perception I have everything figured out. And I always try to remind people, like, I'm just a curious person. I like to learn something. So when I'm interested in something, I want to learn as much as I can about that thing. And then I like to share what I've learned if other people are interested in it as well. So I think the perception might be I have everything figured out when it comes to money. I don't, guys. Like, I really don't. I just know what I know. And then I'm also a very curious person. So if you spend enough time with me, I like to learn and debate things and figure things out because I'm just curious on how things work.
So if anyone wants to pick up your book, hire you, reach out, any of the good business, where do they go?
Yeah, the easiest way is if you're trying to pick up the book, just go to Amazon. It's available on Amazon both in the United States and in Canada. So just search Master Your Mortgage, and then you should see me up there. And then you can purchase the book on Amazon. Now, if you're trying to get in touch with me, or maybe you want to take some of my courses and stuff like that, the best place to go is just to go to wealthmarathon.com. All the courses are on there. And then it will also have information if you want to get in contact with me directly as well.
Excellent, Brighton. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your time. Best of luck with everything.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. And before you go, how do you pronounce your last name correctly?
It's Gbarazia. Try to say without the G. So Gbarazia.
Oh, Gbarazia. Gotcha. Okay, I gotcha. That makes sense. Cool, man. This has been great. Hey, thank you again. I appreciate it. Best of luck.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, we'll talk soon. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.